Welcome to this explainer, the Oak Island Enigma. From Templar crosses to swamp realities, we're diving right into the world's longest-running treasure hunt today. You know the drill. Over 2 centuries of obsession, fortune seekers, and armchair cryptographers. We're going to cut straight through the myth to look at the hard evidence, the wild theories, and yeah, the harsh, very muddy realities of what's actually being pulled out of the Nova Scotian dirt.
So think about this. What do a medieval cross, William Shakespeare, and a muddy swamp in Nova Scotia actually have in common? To figure that out, we're taking a journey. We'll start with a single undeniable artifact, zoom out to some seriously mind-bending historical theories, and then crash right into the sharp reality of modern skeptics. It all starts right on the beach.
Let's just toss the guesswork out the window for a second and look at the hard science here. Using laser ablation and mass spectrometry, Dr. Chris McFarland basically vaporized a microscopic sample of this heavy lead cross they found. The results are, well, they're undeniable. The isotope ratios actually prove we're looking at pre-15th century European lead. And not just any lead, it matches directly to medieval mines in southern France, right in the backyard of known Knights Templar activity.
And this is exactly where that Templar connection really catches fire. Experts went over to France and noticed that this exact style of cross, the one with those 4 unique little pellets in the corners, was carved right into the stone walls of a prison in Dom. Okay, why does that matter? Because that's the very same prison that held dozens of Knights Templar after their mass arrest back in 1307. We are literally linking a physical object pulled from Canadian dirt to a 700-year-old French prison wall. It's a staggering piece of physical evidence for sure.
Now, physical evidence like that cross, it's absolute rocket fuel for grand historical extrapolations. Which brings us to steganography, the practice of hiding a secret message inside an otherwise perfectly ordinary text. For decades, researchers have been arguing that the works of William Shakespeare and Francis Bacon aren't just great literature. They believe they actually contain hidden ciphers that form a literal treasure map.
And the sheer scale of this theory is just wild. You've got 4 independent cryptographers here, all using entirely different texts and methods. Peter Amundsen used deliberate misspellings in Shakespeare's First Folio to find star maps. Jake Roberts analyzed transposition ciphers at Holy Trinity Church. John Edwards went through Masonic books and Templar measurements. And Daniel Ronstam, he decoded a 90-foot stone found right in the money pit. 4 completely different starting lines, yet they all somehow point straight back to Oak Island.
But wait, the synchronicities get even stranger. Amundsen and Edwards both independently highlighted the number 144. Now, on Oak Island, there's this massive boulder formation known as Nolan's Cross. If you measure it out, the base unit is exactly 144 feet, which ties directly into the sacred geometry of the Kabbalistic tree of life. Then, you look over at Francis Bacon's writing, where he mentions the College of 6 days' work. 6 days, measured in hours? You guessed it, exactly 144. It's this exact kind of mathematical alignment that makes the hidden map theory so incredibly intoxicating.
So this grand cryptographic theory starts feeling dangerously plausible when you look at the actual physical evidence coming out of the Earth. And remember, we're talking about stuff found 150 feet underground here. Back in 1897, a drill in the chapel vault brought up a fragment of animal skin parchment with a VI written on it. More recently, down in the H8 borehole, scientists identified actual leather bookbindings stained with rare Tyrian purple dye, right alongside 12th century cotton rag paper. Suddenly, we aren't just talking about numbers on a page anymore.
Really think about what that means. Animal skin parchment, ecclesiastical leather, and Tyrian purple dye, a color that was historically reserved strictly for royalty and the church. These aren't the scattered doubloons of some hasty pirate stash, right? This screams of deliberate, deep earth preservation. It points straight to a buried manuscript or an underground library, which honestly perfectly aligns with those Templar and Shakespearean theories we just talked about.
But you know, high-flying theories eventually have to come crashing back down to Earth. And on Oak Island, that Earth is usually a very muddy, very frustrating swamp. Some theorists believe this swamp is entirely artificial, that it's hiding a sunken galleon or a sacred vault. It really is the ultimate testing ground, the place where the grand romance of the treasure hunt slams headfirst into the grueling, murky reality of the Nova Scotian wilderness.
Let's walk through how exploring that swamp actually plays out in reality. Step 1, they bring in advanced tech like ground-penetrating radar and boom, it pings these massive metallic targets. Spirits skyrocket, obviously. Then comes step 2. Diver Tony Sampson literally has to wade into this freezing, murky bog. And finally, the team is just out there digging practically blind, fighting their way through centuries of dense muck and tangled roots, just trying to find the source of that signal. And the glorious result of all that backbreaking labor? Well, one recent excavation yielded
an old metal surveyor's marker left there decades ago by Fred Nolan. Yup, another massive radar hit turned out to be a wooden plank that, after super careful inspection, was completely devoid of any metal whatsoever. So that grand game-changing anomaly was really just a false positive in the mud. This dizzying cycle, the thrilling clues immediately followed by mundane reality, brings us right to the skeptics. Their main argument is textbook confirmation bias. Simply put, it's our brain's pesky habit of processing information in a way that just confirms what we already want to believe. Skeptics argue that this psychology is driving the entire 200-year hunt. Look, when you're absolutely desperate to find a Templar treasure, suddenly every rusted iron spike you dig up looks like a priceless medieval relic.
You can really see the stark contrast here between the two camps. On the left, the romantic treasure hunter looks at the island and sees secret Templar vaults, Shakespeare's lost manuscripts, and buried Spanish galleons. But over on the right, the skeptic sees something way more mundane: 1700s colonial farming, military camps, and naval tar kilns. And it makes sense. A naval tar kiln leaves a sunken pit in the ground that looks suspiciously like a collapsed treasure shaft, especially if you don't know exactly what you're looking at.
There's this critique from a Reddit user, limplegs_McGee, that perfectly hits the nail on the head. They asked if searchers are fitting facts to their pre-existing narrative instead of letting the facts find a narrative. And that is absolutely crucial. When you dig up a broken piece of pottery, do you let it tell its own humble story of colonial history? Or do you try to force it to be the missing key to King Solomon's temple?
The academic establishment really doesn't mince words about this either. Harvard professor Richard Joltes calls the whole thing a long-running mania for treasure legends. Maritime historian Dan Collin flat out dubs it classic pseudo-history. The online consensus among historians is pretty much that it's just a combination of 200 years of bad history. They warn that without a confirmed original deposit, every single new find is just another piece being added to a speculative, endless puzzle.
Yet, here is the undeniable truth of Oak Island. Despite all the cold water thrown by skeptics, and despite the very literal, very frequent disappointments in that freezing mud, we remain absolutely desperate to find meaning in the dirt. Millions of us are completely captivated, because the evidence of human activity is actually there, from that 12th century paper to the lead cross, even if we don't fully understand the why just yet.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this to ponder. Are they unearthing a genuine, paradigm-shifting historical anomaly, or have we simply built a 200-year mystery out of our own desire to believe? Is the true curse of Oak Island a booby-trapped vault? Or is it our unyielding human obsession with finding a grand narrative hidden just out of reach? Take a look at the evidence, weigh the steganography against the skepticism, and you decide for yourself what truly lies at the bottom of the money pit.